What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to my tiny garage. On my bench here today we have the Murray push mower making an appearance back again. If you missed the first video on this, we found it in a barn and got it running again. I will link that up here for you to go check out if you would want to see the first part of this. In this part, we have it back on the bench because it is burning a little bit of oil. In the end of that first video, I had mentioned that I thought that it might be. I thought that maybe because it was sitting for a while that it would kind of fix itself out and seat the rings again. Doesn't seem to be the case. Looks like we are going to need to search into this here a little bit better. So usually what happens when it's burning a little bit of oil on these Briggs flatheads anyway, most of the time from my experience, it seems as though the valves are going to need an adjustment. So we're going to be popping the head off of this unit here and getting into the valves, and we're going to be adjusting those valves. So I will show you in this video how we adjust an old flathead Briggs engine to get the valve clearance and lash back into spec again. So let's go ahead and pull a few parts off of here and deep dive into this engine. Can tell a little bit of oil fouling on there, so definitely getting some oil through there. Yep, there we go. It would appear, in this case, it would certainly appear like we're getting oil coming in through the exhaust valve, which would make sense because we've noticed that we will get some oil dripping out the exhaust pipe. When it sits, it'll get a little oil puddle over here. So nothing looks crazy on the cylinder. No crazy scores or anything like that. If we bring our piston out to the front, there's no excessive play. It's a pretty tight fit, so looks like our culprit is most likely going to be these valves. We'll be able to tell a little bit better once we get into this a little bit further, but for the direct moment I will say that. So let's hop over here on this other side and get our cover off. So to get into our valve springs, they're back behind this cover. I don't have to take the muffler off, but I am going to, just to make it a little bit easier. So we're just going to pop this off of here. There we go. I don't know if we can, probably can't see that, but just oil sitting in the bottom of that. So I would definitely say that we're getting oil in through our exhaust manifold by the looks of it. so in here we're able to see our valve springs and such. Spinning around. So that's what we're going to check here next and see if this is within spec still or not. According to the Briggs Stratton manual for this is a 450 series engines, not the 450E, but it'd be the 450 series, which should be the 9000 series, I believe, by the Briggs books. But either way, we're looking at a intake valve clearance of 5 to 7 thousandths and an exhaust valve clearance of 7 to 9 thousandths. So what I'm going to do is we're going to spin the engine around until we're pushing on one of them. Okay, so right there we have fully pushed on the intake valve. So let's see if we can slip a 5 thousandths in on our valve clearance. Okay, we can slip a 5 thousandths in on the exhaust side. So the exhaust side, they say they want 7 to 9. So let's go right up to 7 and see if we can't flip a 7 thousandths in between. Okay, we can fit a 7 thousandths in pretty good. Let's go the whole way up to 9. See what we think out of that. Yeah, 9 fits in there pretty good. A little bit of drag, so that actually seems to be just fine. So let's spin around here. We'll get this one out, and let's check our intake. Can we fit a 5 thousandths in on our intake? Yep, we can fit a 5 thousandths in between on our intake. Interesting. Can we fit a 7 in on our intake? Can't quite fit a 7 in there. How about a 6? 5. There's a 6. Can we fit a 6 in there? Can almost fit a 6 in there. Yep, there we go. There's a 6 in there. Quite a bit of drag on a 6, but a 6 will fit. So that is within spec. So the intake, we wanted 5 to 7. We can get a 6 out of that. And the exhaust side came in spec as well. So, since that does not seem to be the issue, then the next question would be, where is our oil leaking out from? It could very potentially be our engine piston is scored in an area, or it can also be that our spring area is filling up with oil and running into the engine that way. So I guess let's kind of do some more investigation here and see where we're going with this. While we're right here, since it doesn't really seem like the problem is in with this cover, if I spin the engine over, you can see that it wants to push a little bit of oil out the oiler hole down in the bottom here. What I kind of expected it to be was that that hole to be clogged, and then the it to just be filling up with oil and letting oil in on an open valve, or what it most of the time seems to be on these Briggs is that the valves are out of adjustment and then it burns oil that way. But it actually does not seem to be the case on this one. So while I'm here, I'm just going to stick a little piece of wire down that hole, and it goes right down. It's not clogged. So I'm going to say that I don't really think our problem seems to be in here like I had originally thought it was. Most of them do seem to be that way, but this one does not seem to be one of those cases. So I'm going to go ahead and just put this cover back on, because I think that we are done in here. And my next point of interest, I guess you could say, is I kind of expect then that it's going to show that our piston rings are bad. So we're just going to put get this all kind of back together. Something like that. Alright, and let's turn our attention towards the front of the machine, I suppose. Okay, so we're back around here to the front of the machine, and the only thing I can really say is that we are getting an interesting streak of oil that's being left, and usually that would indicate to me a little bit of a piston ring problem. But we kind of have only really a few different case scenarios of what we have going on here. So when we started this adventure, I had kind of thought that it's burning oil because the valves aren't adjusted. These are, you know, this engine here was made in 2012 according to the date code stamped in it. So I had just expected, like most, you know, older engines here like this, it needed a valve adjustment, a good valve clean, valve seat clean, head clean. It just needed cleaned up, readjusted, and it wouldn't be burning any more oil. Well, it seemed like the valves are adjusted just fine. So being that we're getting some oil laying in the head, that really kind of indicates to me just a few different things. It's definitely either coming or getting into the head with the exhaust port. Now, whether it's coming into the exhaust port or whether it's going out of the exhaust port, we're trying to figure that out. So there's kind of three different scenarios on these flatheads that it could really be. It can be worn piston rings, and then it's allowing oil to seep down through when it's been sitting. It can be the valve seats themselves, so the piece of brass that's pressed into the block that the seats go through, they can be worn out. And if that's worn out, it'll allow oil to come in from where we just were behind that cover in between there, and it'll come and leak into the exhaust manifold right here, which could fill this area up and come out here. Since there's oil laying in the bottom of the exhaust port, it's kind of hard to determine which one it actually is. I'm not really sure. So what we're going to have to do is I'm going to back this engine up here, back as far as I can get it with the piston, and I'm going to let this hang open right there. We're going to wipe this cylinder clean. So there's no new oil in there. It's all perfectly clean. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to stick a block of wood back underneath the rear tires, and that's going to tilt the engine oil towards the front of the engine. And we may have to let it sit like that for a day or two, overnight. It just depends. But we're going to have to let this sit here for a little bit, and I want to see if we can figure out where that oil is coming from. Hopefully, by tilting the oil front, we can induce the leak over time. So we'll either see it on our paper towel. I'll probably put some new ones down here so we can actually see for sure. But we should be able to see then where it's going to leak out of. If it's out of the cylinder, there should be a streak of oil coming down here over time, and we should see something, which would indicate we have a bad piston ring. If we see it coming out of here or over here, then that would indicate a bad valve seat. So we're going to have to let the test of time kind of go on this and check to see where exactly our oil is going to come out of. What I could potentially do in this case, what I could potentially do if I wanted to, is I could put the new head, clean this all up, put a head gasket on it, put it all back together, and then we could do a cylinder, the name escapes me here, but we can pressurize the crankcase and figure out where we're getting oil from, or air from. So to do that, what you would do is you would put the piston back the whole way, and you'd have both these valves closed, and then you induce pressurized air to the top of the engine, and you'll be able to tell then what's leaking, so you can push air out. So you should not feel any air out the exhaust port, you should not feel any air out of the air cleaner, and you should not be getting any air out of the oil dipstick. I think a leak down test, there we go, a leak down test is what they call that. So your engine has a certain percentage of leak down that it is allowed, so to speak, before things need rebuilt. Now the way we could utilize that in this case is we would have to clean up our guides really well, and to be fair, probably to do this test correctly, we would have to lap our valves into the head, readjust our valves, put this all back together, and then induce the leak down test. And what we would want to see is no air coming out of all three places. But what my wonderment here is, what would happen with that is if we get no air coming out of anywhere, then that still leaves our valve guide as an option, because that doesn't have anything to do with the air, of course. But what it could tell us is if we have piston ring issues, because if it's letting air in through around the piston and it's coming out the oil dipstick tube, then we know that we're pressurizing the crankcase. So we could also do that, but that's kind of a fair amount of work and fair amount of parts to kind of throw in here just to figure out if our rings are bad. So I'm going to give it the first test of time, let everything kind of sit the way it is, and just see if we get oil coming from anywhere at all, any fresh drips or stuff. If that doesn't work, then we'll have to figure out some other more invasive techniques of determining what exactly is leaking on this engine. But we're going to start simple, we're going to keep it simple, we're going to keep it low budget for now, and just see if we can try to force a leak based on what it's already doing. So it's already, just as it's been sitting on the ground, apparently getting oil into it. I thought that it was just improper clearances on the valves, but it would seem to me that it's actually leaking oil into the head. So when we start it, we're getting that oil leak and not blow by on the valves. So let's just see if we put it back into its natural state, its natural habitat, so to speak, that it wants to leak this way. See if we can induce a leak, see if we can figure out what it's going to leak from, and then perhaps we can go from there about seeing what we might be able to do to fix that. So we're going to let this sit for a little while. I'll be back with you guys, of course, very shortly right here next, and I'll let you know how long we've been letting it sit for, and to see what things we got cooking. It has been about 2 days since we filmed that last portion to this video here on this mower, and we can see that we are seeing some leaks. So this paper towel was originally over here underneath the cylinder like this. I came down after 24 hours, and to me it looked like it was draining out of the piston area. So I had moved the cloth over, so right about there as you saw it, for the remaining 24 hours. And as best as I can tell, it looks like we are coming out of the piston cylinder itself. There is a little tidbit of oil in there, if you can see that. If I remove the piston, you'll see that it's pushing oil out. So it would appear that our issue is going to be with our piston rings here in this case. The valve body over here, the guides seem to be clear. They don't have any more oil buildup in it. So it would appear, here you can see it's pushing some oil out, so it would appear at this point that our issue is with piston rings. So I guess we're going to dive in this a little bit deeper than I had originally anticipated, which is perfectly fine, I guess. It should make some good content anyway. So what we're going to do, I suppose, is we're going to remove the engine off of the push mower itself, and we're going to take the bottom end off of the engine, and we're going to pull that piston out, and we're going to do some bore measurements. So we're going to be measuring the bore to see what kind of a reading we're going to get, and we're going to find out if we can get proper rings for what we need, and we're also going to find out kind of the health of the bore itself. Is it egg shaped, or is it still somewhat round, or Is it wider at the bottom than it is at the top? Is there more slop in the center? Not really sure. Is it worn like an hourglass? We're not really sure, so we're gonna have to take some measurements and find out what we got going on. Managed to get one broken bolt out of 3, but that's not too big of a deal. Should be able to pull it out of the block then, once we get that far. Looks like we'll have to remove this brake cable that we had installed in the previous video, so we'll just do the exact reverse out of that, get that cable disconnected. And we should be free, I think. Engine should pretty well just lift right out of there. Perfect. Alright, let's get this deck off the table. We're going to attempt to use the bolt as a push point to pull off this blade coupler. See how well it works. Rather nicely, as a matter of fact. Looks like it pulled right off of there. Sometimes you really gotta fight with these. So to see it coming off so easily, it's kind of nice for a change. There we go. Pull that all off. Set that aside. I'm gonna go around and clean this shaft off with a wire brush. I'm not worried about damaging this seal because we're gonna end up replacing that seal anyway, but I'd like to get a lot of this junk off the shaft. Shaft's good and cleaned up. Dust is blown out from around it, so we should be good here to take our bottom sump bolts out to hopefully lift off the bottom sump. we go. Bottom sump seal is broken, so we should be able to just kind of tap this off of here. Okay, there we go. Got our cover off. Put that back there where it belongs for the governor. Very nice. Got our sump off the bottom. We can start looking at some parts. So here is our governor piece here that intertwines with our camshaft. And that is what helps set your governor on the throttle position side. And then of course right here we have our our camshaft, which is connected to our crankshaft. So if I would go around and I spin the flywheel, get my hands out of the way, a good place to hold this. Here we go. So as we spin, you can see that our camshaft spins, moves our crankshaft, which in turn is pushing our tappets in there, and you'll see on the top that we have our valve movement. So what we're after here today is we are after to get these bolts out to disconnect our piston from our crankshaft. Most of the time I'm not really too worried. They can only kind of really go in there one way, and a lot of times they are marked. But just because I'm just going to mark this carrier with a marker so that I know those two lines interconnect so that I can't get it backwards. And then just going to mark a little red mark here so I know that the piston, that red mark, is going to face me. That way I can't accidentally make a mistake. I might just pop off this camshaft. What I want to look for though is a timing dot before I get too crazy. So they have a little indent in the camshaft right there which meshes up with your arrow. There's an arrow on the gear on the crankshaft. So if I pull this out of there, get that kind of out of our way, set this off to the side. We're going to clean all these parts up then. Then we can pull out our tappets because they're going to fall out anyway. Both of these are the same. So we're going to set them off to the side. There we go. So now we spin back around our cam. We can get in there to that bolt just a touch bit easier. Finish taking this out the whole way. Okay. Now at this point, if you were inclined to, this would be where, even perhaps before this, you would have taken the flywheel off, which of course is connected to the other side of this crankshaft. So at this point, you would be able to pull the crankshaft out entirely. I'm not going to go that far. I don't feel that we need to for this rebuild. I'm simply just going to stick with, we're just mostly interested in piston rings. There we go, there's our bottom. We're going to inspect that. No crazy wear, no excessive scratches or anything. So this looks good. So we'll set that off to the side. And now we should be able to pull out our piston. So we'll spin this around. Get that up there. Whoops. Our gear came out. There we go. Spin our piston around. And then we should be able to push our piston right out the top. There we go. And we got, of course, our red mark indicating the piston goes up. So what kind of a story does this tell here? Honestly, not too bad a one. Nothing looks real crazy. Suppose there is a little bit of wear right there. So what side would that be? That would be the downside of the piston. So let's see. So our engine, this is our blade side of the engine. So our excessive wear should be showing on this side, which it doesn't particularly seem to be, but it's okay. It's alright. I wasn't sure what I'd find. I mean, to be fair, even the rings just could be worn a thousandth or two, which would allow oil, of course, to pass through there. So let's kind of tilt the block up and have a look down our bore. Which is, well, all you can see down in there, but which is, in all accounts, pretty clean. We'll have to take some measurements. Looks like there might be a little bit of a ring wear right there, but I can't feel it with my finger, so that's good. Let's let's grab some measuring tools and see what we can figure out. Getting ready to measure our bore to see how out of round we are. So what we have set up here is we have the baseline bore measurement of 2.562. That is in inches, so we have a base bore measurement from Briggs of 2.562. So we have our micrometer set up for that measurement, the 2.562, and then we have our bore gauge set up to be reading 0 when we have it in on that measurement. So right there, when we are straight, we are reading 0 on the bore gauge. So any kind of deviation off of 0 will tell us what, you know, if we're too big or how things are worn. So we have this set at the factory spec that when it is touching 2.562, the dial will show 0. So now we step over here to the block and we start taking some measurements. Ideally, you want to take 6 measurements. So you want to do at the top of the bore in a crisscross pattern. So you do side this way, and then we continue that down. So 2 at the top, 2 at the middle, 2 at the very bottom. And as the piston's going up and in there, back and forth like that, it can tend to wear things like an hourglass. Because at the top, the crank is going around, the bottom, the crank is going around. So the bottom and the top are usually worn the worst. So we want to check and make sure that it is an hourglassed out massively, which of course can cause a lot of piston slop and slap as things are going around there at a high speed. And we also want to make sure too that it's not egg-shaped, since it's running primarily, well, with gravity. It's going down, it's running down on the bottom, so it has a tendency to egg along the gravity cycle. So we want to go through here and make sure that our spec is not too far out of spec, and that we can still feasibly get new rings in here without, you know, going to some extreme measures. So let's hop over here to the block and kind of do some measurements and see what we think. So I'm going to put this down in there, right in there at the top, right on the inside. And we're going to do this as straight as we possibly can. So what do we got? So right there would be a 0. Look at our measurements, kind of roll things back and forth. So the most we can get out of that, so there would be a negative, which we don't want that. Kind of find a happy medium. It seems like the most, if it was bad, the most we can get out of there is about 3.5, all but touching 4 thousandths. Going that way. So let's just say something like that. Now if I spin it this direction, which might be a little hard to do for you guys to see, there we go, we'll try that. So if we look at things this direction, we can see, looks like right about 4 thousandths. So we have about a 0.5 thousandths of an egg shape going down. Okay, well that's tolerable, and that tells us that we have a 4 thousandths out. So we're 4 thousandths past spec according to that. So let's go down to the middle of the cylinder and measure that out. It's a little bit of guesswork, trying to figure it out, trying to hold it straight as you can, not cock it funny. Somewhere right in there, so that's coming out to be about 3 thousandths. Okay, so according to that, we have a 1 thousandths hourglass shape. So we have a 1 thousandths hourglass shape from the top and the bottom. By that measurement, how are we looking this direction? Try to find about center where it looks level. Best I can tell on that one, it looks like it's going to be about 4 thousandths. So we have a little bit of an hourglass shape. So let's go down to the very bottom. What do we have down here? Get this centered up here as best we can. By all accounts, looks to be about somewhere between 1 to 2 thousandths. So we do have a little bit of a taper by going this way. How are we looking going this direction? Something like that. Looks like almost going that way we have a pretty wide variation. Right about 3.5 to 4 thousandths. So we have a little bit of wear there. We definitely have a little bit of wear. Let's see what our ring options are. and see where to kind of go from here once. To help us make this decision as far as what size piston rings we want to get, they offer the standard size, or they offer 20 thousandths over. So I'm not sure. I would almost bet we could probably get away with either one. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to take off this ring, and we're going to put it down in here, and I want to see what the current gap of these rings are, to kind of give us an idea, at least like a little place to start maybe. So I'm going to kind of get this started in here, and a really nice and easy way to get it to press down in there evenly is then use your piston, and you just kind of push it down in like that. So what kind of a ring gap do we currently have? And the ring gap is the gap in between here. So as the engine runs, things get hot and these rings expand, and if they don't have enough clearance, you can risk damaging your engine. So by my calculations, we should be running at around 10 thousandths of an inch for our ring gap. So let me find, there we go. Here's my 10 thousandths. How well does that fit in there? That fits in there really loose. That fits in there very loose. So we are way over 10 thousandths, that's for sure. Let's try something like 15 thousandths. Okay, that doesn't quite fit. So 13. 13's loose. About 14. 14's loose. Maybe I had them doubled up. 15, yeah, 15's loose. I had them doubled up. My apologies. 16, 17, 18, 19, man, 20, 21, 22. Man, we might as well just jump. Where's 30 at? Here's 30. 30 is snug. It's probably more like a 31. Wow. So we have almost 20 thousandths over what our ring gap should be. So that sort of indicates to me that we probably should change over to the oversized rings. But what I believe I'm going to do is I'm going to order both sets so that we have both options. And we'll see if I'm right. We'll see if I'm right on that. But it would almost appear that we might be needing the oversized rings. So one of the things that we will do is we are going to hone this cylinder out and put the hashing back in it, which will help kind of even the cylinder out a little bit. We are going to go through and do that, so that will make somewhat of a difference. So I'm interested to see when the new rings come compared to these old rings, just how bad they actually are. Let's go ahead and slide this back in here so I don't lose it for now. But I believe that's what we're going to do. We're just going to get both sets of rings coming so that we have both options there to choose from. And we'll kind of go from there based on our judgment measurements. But it does seem that it is doable. It does seem it's rebuildable. So yeah, I guess we'll kind of get our parts on order and go from there. Alright, and with that being said, I believe that's all the farther I can currently go at the minute. So we're just going to end this here on a part 1, and we'll finish our rebuild in part 2. So I need to get rings coming for this. I need to get a bottom sump seal for the outside casing, and then I also need to get a sump crank seal as well so we can seal that all up. Everything else seems to be in okay condition, so join us next time and we will get all that installed. We'll hone the cylinder out and kind of get things ready to go. So with that being said, that is all I got for this episode. I appreciate you stopping by to watch. Drop a comment down below, let me know what you think. Have you ever bore gauged a cylinder before? Have you ever gone this far in an engine rebuild? Let me know, and maybe If you have any suggestions, let me know those too, because I don't claim to be a professional at this. I've only done this a handful of times, so feel free to correct me down below if you see fit. Smash that like button, it really does help out the channel, and if you're not subscribed, be sure that you get subscribed so that you don't miss part 2 of this rebuild. And maybe after 4 or 5 episodes, we can actually have this push mower operational and ready to send down the road again. So that is all I got for this one. We will see you in the next episode.